Hi, my name is Strain, and I've been in Army for 3 years now. And if you clicked on this video, there are three reasons for that, I suspect. You could be an Army yourself, just a general K-pop fan, or hopefully maybe like someone who wants BreadTube content, because I am hoping to appeal to those types of people too. I'm hoping to mix the realms of K-pop and BreadTube. And if you're an Army, I might be boring you now, but I'm going to be spending most of this video saying a lot of very nice things about BTS, so please stick around. If you're just a K-pop fan in general, so am I. I don't think BTS is the only good thing about K-pop or anything. I'm not one of those people that tries to separate them from K-pop overall or something like that. Although I do think they do a lot of things that are unique and that other K-pop doesn't quite do in the same way. But I like K-pop a lot, all of it. I'm a big fan of all kinds of groups, and I think over the course of this channel I'll probably be talking about a lot more than just BTS. But I wanted to start off talking about BTS because, well, A, they're my favorite, and, well, the reason why they're my favorite is because there's a lot to them. I think if you're a K-pop fan and you're one of those people who doesn't see why BTS is so special, I think hopefully I can communicate that over the course of this video. And also, if you're here because you're looking for BreadTube style content, I am also a leftist. And I think there's actually a lot of interesting stuff to talk about there. Some people might be thinking, like, what does K-pop have to do with politics? Other people might be thinking the opposite. K-pop is a very capitalist thing, so why would you combine those two worlds? And I think that K-pop is, in a large part, a result of capitalist industry and the industrialization of entertainment and of art. And a lot of the reasons why K-pop is the way it is because of those things. However, I think there are reasons why K-pop is good that also result from that. And I'll qualify that statement. I'm not a fan of, like, industrialization overall. But let me explain. K-pop is fun. And the reason why people like it is because it's fun. For me personally, I was barely even into, like, I've never been into pop music, but I love K-pop. And the reason why K-pop is important to me and why I think it's not like this bad thing is because it's so fun and because we live in a society, Joker, whatever, where fun is an important and limited resource and anything that brings that is valuable. And I think when you talk about K-pop as this result of capitalism, well, part of the reason why it's the result of capitalism is because it's the result of the market tending to a need for A, fun, and B, a need for companionship. And in a way, K-pop is, of course, it has a lot to do with parasocial relationships, and it is sort of the mass production of relationships. And that's weird and dystopian. I think if you're a leftist watching this, that is a weird thing. It's not something K-pop only does. Parasocial relationships are increasingly prolific in the modern day. And it's because it does actually, there are problematic side effects, of course. But parasocial relationships do help people feel less lonely. And personally, there are a lot of parasocial relationships I have that I value, even if that's weird to say. I think a lot of people are similar, even if they don't want to admit it. At least for me, I'm not ashamed to say that there are parasocial relationships of value, including but not limited to ones in K-pop. Because I'm a lonely boy, and yeah, I stay at home. I don't get along with people a lot in the real world, and K-pop is like, gets you a bit of what you want from a relationship. Of course, it can never give you everything. But it gives you a bit of what you want without the complications and stuff. And it's weird to call that a good thing, but I think when we live in a society where isolation is so inherent to the way the society runs, it's the lesser evil, I think, to have something like the commodification of relationships, as weird as that is to say. But yeah, that's one thing I'm going to talk about a little bit in this video. It's more so just a qualifying statement I want to make at the beginning. I will probably expand on that idea more in future videos. But essentially, I don't think there's any contradiction inherent to being a leftist and to appreciating something like K-pop. It's an interesting thing to dissect, and you can learn a lot from it. And also, if you're just here as a K-pop fan, and I'm boring you, don't worry, the good stuff is coming soon. I'm mostly, really am just going to be talking about BTS songs for the majority of this video. But suffice to say that I think anything that alleviates boredom and loneliness is something very important in the world today. And K-pop does do a lot of that, and I'm not going to impugn anyone for consuming K-pop or producing K-pop or anything like that. On top of that, I want to talk about BTS specifically and how I think they do a bit more than just provide fun and alleviate loneliness. I think they take it a step further by providing a lot of genuine understanding for the lives that we all live, like insight into problems that affect almost everyone in the modern day, as well as advice for how to deal with that, and a lot of really surprisingly deep criticism for the oppression that we experience under late-stage capitalism, ironically enough. I think another reason why K-pop, and particularly BTS, there are two reasons why BTS in particular is late-stage capitalist art, and that's because they exist within that system of K-pop in general, which is an industrialized art form, and also because, quite frankly, their themes are deeply rooted and reflective of the experience of living under late-stage capitalism. And yeah, that's what I'm going to be getting into shortly. So, one of the weird things about capitalism is its eagerness even, to sell you a solution to the problems it creates itself. While those problems are numerous, for now I'm just going to be talking about the way people are unnaturally alienated from one another. I say unnatural because for most human existence, we were dependent on some sort of community, but for most people today, we're meant to function pretty independently of each other. For many, daily life involves going to work, getting paid, and using that money to stay alive and healthy enough to keep going to work and keeping the cycle going. Hell, even if you don't go to work, you could still be living a sort of subsistence existence where instead of keeping yourself alive physically, like by keeping food on the table, you could be doing something to keep yourself alive mentally. Either way, no part of the equation in much of our daily lives necessitates friendship or romance. Often, we have to find those things in spite of our daily routines and not as a result of them. What the cycle does require, though, is that you aren't too lonely or depressed to keep putting up with it all. And whenever there's a problem, like I said, the market will attempt to sell you a solution. And that's, I think, where the entertainment industry comes in. Now, if you're like me, and you probably are if you're watching this video, you get this from good old vitamin K. Pop.
Hey, stop it!
See, when Karl Marx analyzed capitalism and the effect it has on us psychologically, he observed what he called alienation. We feel alienation when we're separated from the meaning of our own actions, essentially. And we're alienated from our work because we aren't invested in our own accomplishments. Like, the bosses reap the benefits of our work more than we do. In large part, that's why our daily routines feel so meaningless. We don't actually enjoy the benefits of what we spend all of our time and energy working on. At least not directly. That applies if you're in school too. Like, I think I speak for most students when I say that you're not really just there to learn for its own sake. You're there because it's a step in a long process towards doing something that you think you're supposed to be doing, essentially. And that's one form of alienation. We're also alienated from other people because they're seen as competition to us. Like, there's a limited amount of jobs, and we depend on those jobs. So, other workers who should be, people we have shared interests with become rivals. And that's not to say that we all go about our daily lives seeing every other person as a rival, but it sets the stage of our society in such a way where we don't always have anything necessarily to gain from being friends with someone. We do emotionally, but in a material way, we don't really gain anything. And so oftentimes it doesn't work its way into our schedules. And it can be hard to find opportunities to actually make connections with people. Now, consumerism comes in because that's what we indulge in to forget our alienation and to cope with it. K-pop is interesting to me as an aspect of consumerism because of how it addresses our isolation and our alienation from others specifically. Like, not all things that people spend time consuming do something to, make them feel less lonely in particular.
Your mistake? Oh my gosh, what are you doing now? Are you kidding me? Kimbap kidding? I'm sorry.
The entertainment industry exists to mass produce fun, and K-pop serves that purpose too. But in addition to that, K-pop also mass produces relationships. The K-pop business model is essentially to take like 7 boys and use them to sell 7 million boyfriends. And there's a contradiction at the heart of that. 7 people can't have a personal relationship with 7 million other people. However, 7 people can make 7 million people feel less lonely. And in a way, this balance is ideal for the industry. A treatment that you always need another dose of reaps way more money than a solution that solves the root problem. In that sense, K-pop can be seen as like a crutch for our isolation and depression, in that it makes it easier, but it's not necessarily fixing the root injury. However, you don't solve that issue by kicking away the crutch. And with that, it's time to address the cute boys in the room. Or the ones other than myself, that is. But yeah, now's the part where I want to talk about BTS. Not just because they're my favorite K-pop group, but because I think they do something unique among the K-pop industry and among the entertainment industry in general. And now is also the point where I put on a jacket because it's really freaking cold in here. We got the boys in the house. And we could do this with them. But yeah, so the thing with BTS is that I think, well, BTS is very self-aware of like why their audience listens to them. They know that we're all struggling, we're not happy, our lives are usually pretty unfulfilling and isolating. And we kind of turn to BTS, like with any K-pop group, to help us cope with that. A lot of BTS's music is also about the alienation that we experience and why it's wrong and why we shouldn't accept it. But beginning with No More Dream, the world according to BTS is basically one where young people are railroaded towards a certain life decided by the generations before them and made to work hard at school to fulfill this ironically unfulfilling destiny of eventually making a decent salary and some boring office job, etc. I mean, you know the drill there. I think everyone kind of grows up with that expectation either in their own heads, that's what they're planning themselves, or at the very least, it's what sort of the people around them are expecting of them. And so right off the bat, BTS is talking about something that is a serious thing we all go through. It's whether or not you sort of accept that default future for yourself, or if you're going to make the risk of doing what you really want to do. And BTS are people who took that risk. Like, the main driving force for BTS, at least in the beginning, I think everyone knows, was RM, and to an extent Suga too. And if you look at their backstories and what led them to the group, you see that RM was someone who had a really successful academic career through high school, who, as many of you guys probably know, was in the top 1% of the nation on his college entrance exams. He clearly was succeeding on that railroad that everyone sort of goes on through high school. He had a good academic future and financial future laid out for him. But instead of pursuing any of that, he focused entirely on his rap career as soon as he finished high school. And that's when Big Hit picked him up, and he ended up in BTS. And then in the case of Suga, he grew up in South Korea's poorest city. He was, living in poverty. And he had to work throughout high school. He had to work all the way up until BTS's debut. He even got a serious injury in the process of that, hit by a car, received a major shoulder injury that he just last month received treatment for. And he even had to hide that from Big Hit because he was afraid they wouldn't keep him in the group with such a serious injury just before their debut. In RM, you have someone who looked at the system we're all in, and even though he was succeeding within it, he turned away anyway and did what he really wanted to do. And in the case of Suga, it was someone who was suffering the brunt of that system, and he really shouldn't have been able to get away with taking any risks, but did so anyway, and escaped the system out of sheer desperation. And then even getting into BTS was kind of a miracle for them, but having BTS rise to the top of the K-pop industry on top of that is kind of insane. Like, they were from a nobody agency in an industry that's totally dominated by the big three, and then single-handedly made it the big four. Some people say, like, I guess some people get sick of hearing the underdog story from BTS, but it's seriously insane, and I will never, like, stop being impressed by it. And I think it's also relevant to the point I'm making here, because the reason why BTS succeeds ahead of other K-pop groups is because of how they're able to connect with their fans. BTS's music isn't rooted just in being able to provide some fun and some parasocial relationship, although those things are both definitely present in BTS's music. But it goes a little bit beyond that to offer a lot of genuine understanding and advice for coping through the sort of life that we all have to live in modern society. No More Dream encourages you to reject that default future and take charge of your own life, just like RM and Suga did. But I think, even with that being the case, BTS encourages that, and it did work out for them. But they know it doesn't really work out for everyone. This brings me to Bapse, which is a song that I think a lot of newer fans of BTS probably haven't even heard. And if you haven't heard it and you're a BTS fan, you should probably stop this video and listen to it right now. Because to me, it's one of the most important tracks in their overall discography when it comes to developing BTS's major themes. And the song begins specifically referring to the shrinking economic opportunities that the current generation of youth faces. It's actually really explicit with this, along with songs like Am I Wrong and Go Go. And I would say that those songs, at least, are overtly political songs. And while a lot of their references are specific to Korea, the general idea definitely applies to, I Know America as well. Millennials around the world, and to an even greater extent, Zoomers, just do not have the same opportunity that, like, baby boomers had. I think a lot of young people are aware of this. And in a large part, that's what Bapse is about. The song gets its name from a Korean phrase that goes along the lines of the crow tit, which in Korean is Bapse, and I'm going to say Bapse because crow tit's a weird-ass word. The Bapse will break its legs trying to walk like the stork, and it essentially means, like, stay in your lane or know your place. And essentially, BTS proudly identify with the Bapse in that phrase. And Suga in his rap frames the Bapse as a general underprivileged class and juxtaposes them with the storks, who are the wealthy. In the context of BTS's history, it's also a pretty obvious reference to their general underdog story and the fact that they had to compete with groups in the big three. But altogether, it's about class conflict and the myth of so-called equality of opportunity. The song is also doused in the language of revolution, and it's basically a call to action to the Bapses of the world and a warning to the storks. As RM says in the hook, change, change, bang, bang. I mean, I think we know what that means. Next up is Spinebreaker, which is a song that specifically calls out lifestyle marketing, and it calls out the North Face jacket trend that took over Korean schools, and which basically turned the North Face jacket into a symbol of class divide in Korea, wherein students would, like, buy the most expensive North Face jacket they could afford, and then your social status was basically determined by what jacket you had. And then, the song refers to dirty clothes, and, you could imply that you could at first assume the dirty clothes are the poor clothes, but really the dirty clothes are the expensive clothes. Very clever. But, yeah, I mean, these songs, like, show BTS's general attitude towards issues of class. Like, they're pretty woke, they're pretty class conscious, and it's an important thing to them. And if you consider RM and Suga's backstories, especially Suga's, that makes a lot of sense. So, going forward, you have BTS's first major breakout album, Wings, which took the idea of living your own life to a broader philosophical scale, and then put its own ideas to practice by featuring solo songs from every member of the group, which, to my knowledge, older K-pop fans can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I'm pretty sure that the idea of having a solo song from every single member of the group on a group project, and having the songs be self-written, is pretty revolutionary for K-pop, or at least it was at the time. And you see that a little bit more nowadays, but I don't think it was really much of a thing before Wings came out. And the main title track, or the main single from Wings, was Blood, Sweat, and Tears. And it's a pretty interesting music video, as I'm sure most people who've seen it would agree. It begins with the boys seeming notably youthful and naive while wandering through a museum. And over the course of the video, they lose themselves in the art that they find at the museum, and return a bit more mature and sinister. I want to explain this in more detail. I think it would warrant its own video. But suffice to say that BTS sees art as something that can expose you to new ideas, and then that this new worldview can cause you to reject the sheltered and safe perspective of youth. The song represents BTS as people who fled the conventional school-to-office pipeline in favor of pursuing art, something more meaningful to them, and who have been using that art to tempt others to do the same, almost like an older friend who's acting as a bad influence. This idea is further developed in Dionysus from Map of the Soul Persona, where they literally say art is wine, and then encourage you to drink, drink, drink. In the song, the artist seems crazy because they have their own ideas that put them at odds with society's conventions, sort of like BTS do. It's also important to note that in Jungian psychology, Dionysus is associated with the destruction that precedes creation. He presides over the night, which is the interstice between the end of one day and the beginning of a new one. And night is also the time when you can party, drink, and lose your inhibitions, enabling you to experience something new. Just as Wings put its own ideas into practice by emphasizing solo songs, the Map of the Soul series was filled with references to BTS's past work, aka their past personas, in order to encourage fans to piece together a conclusive message from BTS's discography, essentially a map of BTS's soul. It was a very apt way to follow up the Love Yourself trilogy, which kind of allowed Western media, which just started paying attention to BTS at the time, to sort of run away with a diluted interpretation of BTS's message. I think Love Yourself has kind of become a buzzword along the lines of get good in video gaming, or like do better. And it's something that doesn't really mean much on its own and can often be used to just sweep nuance away from a discussion. And to a lot of people, that seems to be all they're taking from BTS's Love Yourself message. And that's really disappointing to me because BTS has a lot more going into that message than you usually see from it. Personally, I remember thinking when Love Yourself Her was first announced that it seemed like the logical next step for the group to take. And in fact, it really seemed like something the members personally felt strongly about, and really something that they needed. Because some of their more personal music prior to the Love Yourself trilogy could be downright worrying at times. Good example is RM's solo from Wings, Reflection. To my knowledge, it was the first song that actually used the love myself phrase. And of course, the full quote for that phrase was, "I wish I could love myself," which RM says continuously throughout the entire song. The song is all about RM's failure to love himself even after achieving the relative success that he had at that point. The song does also display a lot of RM's lyrical skill. For example, the title is a double entendre, referring not only to the act of reflection that RM is doing in the song, but also RM's reflection in the water, implied in the lyrics, "My height is the diameter of the world," referring to how, when you look at your reflection in the water, you seem to extend from the world as if you're a part of it. However, in two more cases of double entendre that we see in this line, the Korean word for height can also be translated as musical note, and the word for diameter can also mean scream. So essentially, the lyric is saying both, my height is the diameter of the world, and also my musical note is a scream of the world. Taken all together, the line functions as an observation that RM is a part of the world in a literal sense, but it's also a cry for help, because as he elaborates later in the song, he doesn't understand what his place in the world actually is. He goes on to say, they all know where they're supposed to be. I'm the only one walking aimlessly. I don't think RM literally thinks he's the only one like that. But we all have moments where we feel alone in our suffering. And even sharing that suffering, that sense of loneliness, can actually be something that brings you together with other people. Which isn't a stated purpose of the song. But it's the general philosophy that BTS seems to have on, honesty and opening up. And, yeah, I mean, it makes me a little bit emotional. I think that shit's really cool about BTS. Songs like Reflection show that BTS is still susceptible to feelings of alienation and meaningless in their lives, and still capable of empathizing with their fans because of that. And then following that song and following Wings, you got the Love Yourself trilogy, which finally outlined BTS's role in the world. They described that role in Anpan Man, which probably comes across as an outlier to most over the course of Love Yourself tier. But I think that song really embodies the purpose of that album. It's about a hero that overcomes hardship to deliver even the slightest comfort to another person, and how someone who does that is still a hero. And that is exactly the type of hero that BTS aspires to be. Even the suffering BTS felt before realizing their role in the world played a part in helping BTS come to that realization in the first place. It's what allows them to connect with fans the way that they do. And Love Yourself tier is full of realizations that we develop through our suffering. Paradise is another important example of that. In Paradise, BTS encourages us to stop running for nothing, reminding us that we can find happiness in our daily lives, but only if we remember to do so. RM said that Paradise was inspired by Marx's Das Kapital, which is one of the most influential and in-depth criticisms of capitalism that has ever been written. To leftists, also, by the way, this book is infamous for being very difficult to understand without a lot of familiarity with other leftist theory. Although I suppose if anybody could take anything from it without that backlog of information, it would be RM. But generally speaking, if you've read Capital, you've read a lot more leftist theory. Anyway, the connection to Marx in Paradise is not obvious at first, but it makes sense upon closer inspection. The song is really at the heart of what I began talking about in this video. It's about alienation. See, in capitalism, you're always chasing the next promotion or job qualification, like a degree, or even just the next paycheck. And the time and space to do the things that make life worth living have to be found outside of that daily process. If you don't feel like your hard work is meaningful, if you're just chasing someone else's dream, as BTS puts it, you don't have to put up with that. You can stop running for nothing. As is made clear in this album, Love Yourself to BTS isn't just a vibe check, and it's not about forcing yourself to think only positive. It's about accepting your flaws and improving from there. And it's about having dignity in a cruel world that would want nothing more than for you to feel like your suffering is a result of your own mistakes. We live in a world that either has its way or the highway, and the highway could literally mean sleeping in a tent next to a highway. And if you can't keep up with the pressures of the world that are meant to give you the opportunity to avoid that fate, it's not your fault. The world asks for a lot of everyone. Even if other people have it worse, that doesn't excuse what's happening to you. That's just more of a reason to want change. Because the fact is, none of this is necessary. There is a better world possible. And there are other resources to look into to prove that. I could talk about it in the future. It's not within the scope of this video. But a better world is possible. And loving yourself is about not taking the blame for the struggles you have. It's not your fault. And if you look at a song, again, like Bapse, which I bring up again because, like I said, I think it's one of their most important songs. And it's a song that BTS has referred to over the course of their whole discography. At least up until the point where they stopped being Bapse, as Suga once said. But yeah, it's an important song for BTS. We're still Bapses, the rest of us. And as the song states, we need change. the older generation, the establishment, wants to maintain. But we can't have that. That should not be acceptable to us. And if we love ourselves and we have dignity, we shouldn't accept the struggles that we have to experience. As much of their school trilogy was about, we don't need to accept a fate that was predetermined, a life that isn't our own, a life that is created for us. We're all thrust with loads and loads of responsibilities because not everyone can have jobs, not everyone is needed in society by the establishment. And so there's a process that filters the ones who get to be exploited for their labor. A better world is possible, and the people who are already thriving in this world don't want that world to happen because things are already good enough for them. We need change. They want to maintain. We can't have that. I mean, that's part of BTS's message, whether you like it or not. Mark's reading BTS. I really don't think it's a stretch to read into them a revolutionary message. I really, really don't. But even if that's not intended, it is the natural result of what they're saying. And yes, this message is being communicated over the course of a transaction. And for all I know, they could only be saying this stuff because it's clearly very profitable for them. I mean, I highly doubt that, considering they've been saying it since long before profit like this was even conceivably achievable for them. But still, I mean, at least for the case of Big Hit, which is responsible for a lot of BTS's music and their videos and stuff, profit is the beginning and end of their motivation, I'm sure. But what I think is more true of late-stage capitalist art isn't necessarily that it's all this corporate machine production, but that in cases at least like this, the art is still made by humans, at least somewhere along the way, who feel the same things we do and who try to express those feelings, only for that expression to have a monetary value slapped onto it. And while the parasocial relationships that BTS sort of farms from does generate a lot of money for Big Hit, and that is somewhere along the line an ulterior motive for some of BTS's music. But at the same time, they do really connect with people, and they really change lives, and they really improve lives. And it's complicated at the end of the day. Like anything, it's complicated, and I know, at least for me, I would not want to live in not that dramatic, but I would prefer to live in a world with BTS than one without them. I value the parasocial relationship that I have with them, and yeah. I think it's good to be critical of everything. I think it's always good to demand more. You deserve more than what you get in this world. But with BTS, I just can't maintain my usual cynicism. I really appreciate them. Yeah. And I know I'm not the only person, I know I'm not the only person who feels that way. And I'm not crying. It's just excess testosterone leaking out of my eyes. Okay, bye. Anyway, please comment and tell me what you thought of the video, if I went on too long in certain areas, if I rambled, if I should have tried to make it shorter, or if I if my delivery could use some work, if I'm too slow, or if there's too many pauses between my words or something like that. I am looking to improve. I do have long-term goals for this channel, so any kind of criticism I can have now, this is obviously the ideal time for it. So yeah, bye bye.